conscious of others who have died, and of the frailty of our own existence here on earth. We come to comfort and to support one another in our common loss. We gather to hear God's word of hope that can drive away our despair and move us to offer God our praise once again.
But once that I may sing, his eyes on the sparrow, and I know he watches me.
Your word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in, behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I...
I am Grandma's youngest granddaughter, Julie, for those who don't know. And originally I had not planned on speaking today. But I spent this past weekend at our cabin on Lake Champlain and was reminded of Grammy on several occasions. For those who do not know, my grandparents bought a cabin at the end of Willsboro Point on Lake Champlain.
The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear, of what my life and my children's life may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great Erin feeds.
Today, we are here to remember my beautiful mom, Eve Eaton. For those of you who don't know me, I am her middle child, Deborah. She was a teacher, and in school, she taught elementary school, you have show and tell. So I'm going to do a little bit of show and tell, so I hope you'll bear with me. When you lose someone dear to you, you may ask, what is the meaning of a life? When you lose someone like your mother, whose friends called an angel on earth, you may change your question and ask, how can it be that someone was already an angel while still on earth with us? Rather than tell you all the biographic details of my mom's life, I thought I would spend my time with you sharing the memories that paint the portrait of an angel at work on earth. This was my mom's. You probably see an old yellow mixing bowl from the 1950s. I see that too. But when you wash it and you turn it around, you see the sun. My earliest childhood memories are from this bowl. The breads, the special birthday cakes, the Swedish cakes and cookies, and all the wonderful smells that filled our first home on Echo Pond, just up the street and walking distance from this church she loved so dearly. This bowl gave us life and joy, just like the sun outside in our neighborhood in Echo Pond. Because she had 2 ovens, later on when I bought my farmhouse and changed the kitchen, I put in 2 ovens and forego getting fancy appliances because I wanted my house to smell the same. Mom cooked and baked her whole life for everyone else. As kids, we would line up at the holidays and eat everything hot off the Swedish pankaka maker. It's an extremely hot iron grill you put right on the burner. And everything out of the oven would disappear. Mom just kept on baking until there was enough to give to others. She packaged gifts before Michaels had little bags to put them in. And she would give them and hand deliver them to her neighbors, people from this church who were sick, and her friends and her ministers. One Christmas when I visited, she told me she had made 100 Swedish coffee cakes in the shape of a Christmas tree to deliver to her friends. I had never gotten even one to stick together to be presentable enough to give anybody. I developed a new way to make them because I could never figure it out. When she retired, she expanded her cooking and baking, working with my dad at the soup kitchen in Willimantic, then making her own meals and bringing them to her neighbors and friends, especially those in the hospital and later in the nursing home in Mansfield. She made the communion bread every Sunday for her church in Willsboro. She was always making and giving. It was the sheer volume of what she made that still astounds me. We already talked about her prayer shawls. This may be the one from the hospital that came back to her. I used to buy the yarn, so I know these were made by her because I remember the yarn. She picked beautiful colors. Around the time when she reached 375 prayer shawls, I told her to write to the yarn company and tell them what she had done. They sent her a few weeks later 3 or 4 boxes about 4 feet high and about 3 feet wide of yarn. You can imagine. It didn't take her too long, maybe a couple of months. She finished all that yarn. She was so fast. We eventually lost count, and she could no longer remember to write down who she gave them to. Actually, it didn't really matter. She didn't need to brag about how many she made. All that mattered was that she gave comfort to someone. And perhaps more of you are lucky recipients of these. Some of you at this church might remember her sweet, 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 sweet baby sweaters. I only wish I had one to show you as a show and tell. They were so perfect, so sweet. She could make one in an hour, and sometimes she added booties and a little hat for the baby. You, from this church, packaged them and sent them to Africa in care packages. There must have been hundreds, maybe even 1,000. Could one of you maybe teach me? Because I never slowed down in my life enough to learn from her, and now I'm really sorry. Mom made lots of other things. Here's an Easter egg. She never made anything just simple. It had a surprise inside.
One of those?
That you could take out. Perhaps some of you received one of her hand-embroidered Christmas cards. They're not simple hand embroidery. Each year was different. I have so many they could fill an entire table or maybe 2 tables. In her last years, I would go look for the backing, and she would tell me I need 75, 50, depending on the year. Can you imagine? 75 individually made, embroidered, some of which went to Sweden to her family. The volume was remarkable. She made ornaments and little things like these pins. July 4th, the winter, Halloween, to sell at the bazaars at her churches. She made sweaters for my dad and me and anyone who would ask her. She made special things like this basket of farm animals. I'm not done yet. My dad loved piglets. Down to the kitten, and the chicks, and the duck, and another cow. She She gave them to me when I bought my farmhouse as a surprise. Each thing was made by her beautiful hands and the love and care of an angel. It was with her hands that she said goodbye to us her last 2 days, when she had so much trouble swallowing and speaking. The beautiful hands that made so much and gave so much love. Even in her last moments, she was speaking with us with her hands. Right before she passed away, I was able to read Mom a biography of her great-grandfather on her father's side, who came from Galway, Ireland in the early 1800s to New York City and then moved to Pittsburgh. He was an illustrious baker with 10 employees living in his own house in the early 1800s. He then became the flour, not this flour, but the flour inspector for the mills for the state of Pennsylvania and the state legislature. And he built the city hall for Pittsburgh and many parts of the Pittsburgh Railroad. I told her, "You have baking in your genes." Perhaps that is why she studied home economics, as they called it in those days. It was in her genes to make things. In fact, she wanted to understand how things worked. Here is one of the magical cookbooks I cherished, sorry, not in great shape, I cherished as a child. I didn't really pay attention to the fact that it's called Chemistry and Food Preparation, a laboratory manual for students of home economics. And at the bottom is this long explanation of all the chemical reactions that take place in the baking. That explains why, when we find her old recipe cards, it tells you to combine H2O. When you're 7, you didn't quite get it. You'd have to say, "Mom, what's H2O?" When I had my last job in New York City, I worked for a nonprofit called God's Love We Deliver. Today they make 7,000 free meals a day for 6 people and deliver them to their homes. She couldn't come to my job. She often came to my other job. She worked harder than all of my staff. In fact, when I told them she had passed away, many of them wrote me notes and said, "Oh my God, your mother did everything. She was better than all of us." But at God's Love, these cookbooks went around for 6 months among the nutrition staff that do the counseling and the chefs in the kitchen. And the head of nutrition used this particular book to find out if she had written about some chemical reaction with milk. So they made a new use for these books. Both my parents were scientists, you see. That was double trouble at home. They loved to learn and to find out about everything, especially new things. Their curiosity and inquisitiveness were enormous. She was a Brooklyn girl living in a new world. She learned all about the wildflowers and birds. She even started a garden up here in Echo Pond. She rented a space because we didn't really have space at our house. The yard wasn't big enough. One of my favorite things was her corn, pearl white, that she froze in these little white boxes that probably came from my father's laboratory. And then she'd take them out in the winter and we'd have fresh corn. And for those of you who are young, this is before they sold frozen food in the grocery store. She would hang old tomato juice cans, big ones, with ropes on us, and she would row the boat across Echo Pond to where the blueberry bushes were. And we would pick all day with her. She never got mad because all of us ate more, had it all over our faces, then we would get into the bucket. And when she would come back, she would make this special pie where the berries were fresh, and she cooked a few berries to make a glaze and mix it in and then chill it. It's still one of our favorite recipes in our family. Not only was her food divine, the way she lived was simple and blessed. She felt that way for sure. How do I know? because I myself paint portraits of people, particularly of faces. When they sit for me, I begin with their eyes. It is my way to see inside to who they are. For my mom, the camera was her eyes. She used her camera to take photos of how she lived her life and what she treasured. They are filled with her homes in Mansfield and Lake Champlain, where she and Dad spent their summers. The weekend after she passed away, Gary, her foster son, who had come to see her, and I pulled them off the old bookshelf we took from her house when we had to sell her house, and took it to my farmhouse, and we took out all of these albums. And Gary just kept saying, astounded, "Oh my God, these are so simple. They're filled with family, friends, like people in this church, fishing, food, flowers, celebrations, and cakes, and more cakes." When I came in, someone told me about how she made everyone a birthday cake. Lots of cakes. The photos are filled with love. Some shots are of the same view repeatedly. She didn't tire of the view from her picture window at the lake, or from my garden to the Adirondack Mountains. She never tired of seeing and recording her love for her places and her family. And in the photos, everyone is always smiling or hugging, or proudly showing off a big catch from the lake. She is taking the photos of her beloved family. In her eyes, there is love. She never tired of capturing her three grandchildren and her three children and Gary, her foster son, 8 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren, and her many lifelong friends from this church and her church in Roseboro, as well as those that they both worked with, my father and my mother. She appreciated especially those of you who came to pick her up to be able to come to this church when she could no longer drive herself, and those of you who visited her at the nursing home in her last years when she could no longer walk. She didn't talk a lot in those last years, but believe me, she knew when you visited, she knew when you sang to her, she knew when you read to her. She really appreciated it. It meant so much to her. Family was everything to Mom. It is remarkable to me because her father and mother divorced, we just found out looking at the papers, when she was just 3 years old. Quickly afterwards, her mom put her and her younger brother in a paid orphanage where she had to clean the toilets, even though her mother paid, because her mother was forced to go back to work. And in those days, there was no such thing as childcare. Mom never had role models for raising a family. And she was a Brooklyn girl who didn't know how to drive when she arrived in Stores. My dad had to teach her. And she couldn't use her degree at UConn because of nepotism rules. It didn't matter. She had never complained or even spoken about the orphanage until many, many years later. Only recently did she tell me that these beautiful cars that she had saved were from when she was in the orphanage with her, that her mother sent her while she was in the orphanage. And I had them at the farm on her dresser, not knowing that that was when they came from. She saved all of those and she treasured them. She didn't complain about being in Stores either and the loss of her career opportunity. Instead, she thrived in the country. She went back to college. She had a master's degree. She went back to college and became an elementary school teacher, where she estimated she touched over 500 students. When open classrooms were started in England, she went to see them with my brother and brought back the ideas to Stores grammar. She was a pioneer in education, as she would be later with my dad when they were the first residents in the new retirement community at Glen Ridge in Stores. Like my dad, she was open to new ideas and put them to work to better the world. I can only imagine the countless ways in which she touched her students and the many students' teachers that she guided over the years. I wish she had been my teacher. She would have corrected my penmanship. But as my mom, she chose not to tell me it was horrendous until I was older. And then she told me I didn't hold the pen right, and my handwriting was too small. Hers was perfect, clear and bright like the angel she was, and she loved to write. Someone recently wrote me a card because they stopped hearing from my mom this holiday. She always wrote her friends. It was the daughter of her, the best, what is it in the wedding? The maid of honor in the wedding. It was her daughter had written me, wanting to know if my mom was okay. For my dad, she was the love of his life. They told a story of him chasing after her at Cornell University up the stairs. My daughter, as a teen, called them Ham, that's my dad's name, and eggs, instead of Ham and Eve. They just went together, like ham and eggs. I recently was looking for my high school yearbook because I had my 50th reunion this weekend, and I couldn't find it, and I was going through a box, and out fell this moldy old letter from 1969 from my father, sent to me in Sevilla, Spain, where I had not done what I was supposed to and was living with a guy, trying to find a job so I could stay there, but not having a great time in the relationship. My dad maybe wrote me 3 letters. I didn't remember that he had written me this letter. So it came out as a message from heaven just recently to tell me he was calling to my mom. In the letter he wrote, "The process of development of a mature relationship between 2 individuals living together does not happen at once and possibly takes years. The latter I know because I appreciate your mother more each year, and because of this, our relationship is stronger each year. As you well know, she has given much more than your dad." And he continues with a love letter. I took this letter to her about 3 weeks before she passed away and read it to her. She spoke to me and held my hand and smiled, her hands. He adored her. She made his life full of love and light. My mom would want to thank all of you for her beautiful, simple life, rich with friends and family. She adored her grandchildren, Julia and Christoph, who came often in her last years to take her outside for a bit of flowers. She loved her flowers and fresh air. Chucky, who came to sing, not only for Mom, but for the people in the nursing home. Patty, who brought the pure joy of her adorable great-grandchildren and discussion of her work as a principal and as a PhD student in education at UConn. Andrew, who could talk up a storm, and Catherine, who pursued nutrition, which they both loved and was their career. And Nate and Oni, who came from afar, from Switzerland, bringing her always news of their lives, which she waited for anxiously. She waited for those visits with pure joy. She especially loved when William, Avi, Pam, and Eddie would visit because their trips were longer. The nursing home would tell me when I would come, the grandkids were here. Your mother loves her grandkids. Mom never asked for much, but one quiet day after her only brother died, she told me she wanted to meet her Swedish family. For about 10 years, I talked to everybody I knew in New York. Nobody helped me, but then we hit the jackpot. I won free tickets to anywhere in the world for 2 people, and I bumped into a Swedish genealogist online from her hometown in Söderhamn, Sweden, who found her cousins living in Sweden. I planned our trip. I knew she wouldn't leave my dad because he had been quite sick with his Parkinson's and he was blind. So I enlisted my beautiful husband Julio to stay and babysit. But I was smart because I didn't know if that was enough. And because she adored her grandchildren, I invited Nate and Andrew. It was a little bit of a bribe. Well, Dad died February before the trip. She didn't want to go anywhere. Why are we wasting the money? You go do something. I said, Mom, Nate and Andrew are coming. And so they did. We have an album on the table. You'll see how much she loved it. It was the trip of her dreams. It was her dream to know her family. She was so happy. Thank you, Nate and Andrew. She might not have gone without you. I only saw my mom cry once. It was at the graves of her family during that trip in Sweden. Eleanor had held the flower shop open when we arrived, and she took her to the family graves, and my mother cried. I cannot thank Eleanor enough for bringing our families together and for making that trip to Nate and Andrew. I want to thank Lisa for being another daughter and for going so often going to see Mom and taking her outside so many times in her last year. And a special thanks to my brother Charlie for taking care of all her affairs these past years as the dementia worsened. You made it so much easier for me to come on the weekends to see Mom. I also want to thank my husband, Julio, for letting me spend so much time away. For 2 years, I went every Tuesday to Friday and came home for the rest of the days. And 1 year, I wasn't able to drive because of an illness, and he drove me all of those trips. The trips from New York City are long and tiring, especially in the summer, and you never complained, Julio. Mom was always especially happy to see 2 of us instead of just old me. Our family also wants to give a special thanks and shout out to Dr. Dardick, who guided us through Mom's heart virus, her dementia, and her seriously broken hip that ended her up in the nursing home. She trusted him as we did to respect her wishes and to help her as much as he could to live as fully as she could. A huge thanks also goes to all the staff at Mansfield Nursing and Rehabilitation because they made her last few years special, even though she wasn't in her own home. There are too many of them to name, but we, Charlie and the family, appreciate them so much. Their kindness to Mom will always be remembered. And thanks if you donated to her scholarship fund in elementary education. It was very important for both of my parents to be educators and to help other people get education. Mom waited for Gary to come from California. She wanted to thank him for being so good to her. She never thought how great she had been in taking him into our family when he was a young boy, making room in a house that was already crowded with my grandmother living there. That was how my mom was. She was always thinking of the other person. That Friday night, Gary and I went to say goodnight to her. Around 1 a.m. in the morning, I felt her. She touched me lightly as she went to heaven, as she did to my dear husband. When we told Gary in the morning when he woke up that she had passed away, he said he had woken up around the same time, around 1 in the morning, and he heard my father say, "Eve, now what took you so long?" We all cracked up laughing, because that's exactly probably how my father would have spoken. He wasn't very mushy. He didn't really know how to say, "I adore you, I missed you." He just had his own way of talking to you. When we looked at the photo albums that weekend, one of them hugging on the beach at the lake popped out right away at me. It made me see them now hugging in heaven. He had waited 15 years too long. I love that photo of them hugging. You'll see others of them hugging if you go next door. So I see them hugging and dancing in heaven. It helped me with my loss of my angel. My beloved mom, dearest, sweetest grandma, and great-grandmother, and dear friend to so many people. At our last visit, I read her this poem a second time. Mom, you gave me life. You gave me everything I am, everything I have become. everything I cherish and treasure. I will miss you so dearly, but each day will have you in my heart and talk to you in heaven as I do with Dad. Now, sweet Mom, you are an angel in heaven. I cannot imagine all the good you would do in heaven. You have inspired us all on earth with your life of love, kindness, and generosity. Mom made this embroidery with the bluebird of happiness. It's my favorite bird. It says, "This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." Psalm 118. May we all now go forward today as she did, rejoicing in the Lord, that he gave us this day to remember our mom, our grandmother, our great-grandmother, and friend.